Time for the Daily Rat. And welcome to the show, everybody. I'm joined by my co-host and bowling partner, Forbes columnist Rick Unger is here. Also, she's one of Philadelphia's top attorneys and was once a stunt double for Shannon Doherty on 90210. The things you learn.
Every day.
Heather Hansen, welcome. And because we don't already have enough writers here from Forbes today, Forbes.com contributor Bill Tucker joins us. And finally, from lovely Washington, D.C., there's Newsmax TV contributor John Fund. Okay, everybody, it's time for the Daily Download. And President Obama continues to push forward with his goal of striking a deal with Iran while keeping Congress out of the loop. Secretary of State John Kerry visited Face the Nation Sunday, where he was asked if he would apologize to Iran over Senator Tom Cotton's open letter.
I'm not going to apologize for an unconstitutional and unthought-out action by somebody who's been in the United States Senate for 60-some days. That's just inappropriate. I will explain very clearly that Congress does not have the right executive agreement. Another president may have a different view about it. We do our job correctly. All of these nations, they all have an interest in making sure this is in fact a proven peaceful program.
And Senator Cotton had a chance to respond to Secretary Kerry.
You heard what the Secretary said. Unprecedented, inappropriate, unthought out, unconstitutionally wrong. What were you trying to accomplish, Senator?
Bob, I and 46 other senators are focused on stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, and we wanted it to be crystal clear that Iran's leaders got the message that in our constitutional system, while the president negotiates deals, Congress has to approve them for them to be lasting and binding. And I have to say, I'm surprised by Secretary's comments this morning because just a few days ago he testified before the Senate to say that any deal would not be legally binding.
And if you think Senator Cotton stopped there, you'd be wrong.
And now he says that future Congresses can't change a mere executive agreement if we disagree with them or if a future president disagrees with them. That's not the way our constitutional system works, and it's certainly not the way we should be negotiating with Iran.
And then on Saturday night, White House Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough, sent a letter to Senator Bob Corker, who happens to chair the Foreign Relations Committee, essentially telling him to back off any legislation that would require Senate approval for a deal with Iran. So, John Fund, let's start with you. The White House is hell-bent in keeping Congress out of this deal, aren't they?
Well, as they should if they're a runaway executive branch. I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to cut their own deal behind closed doors and then foist it on the American people. Now, normally, I'd have no problem with that, but we're dealing with Iran. And there's one thing we've learned from Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan to George Bush. Over and over, presidents have been snookered by Iran. That's why Congress is so concerned. So the president could seek a treaty if he had a good deal. That would require a vote of the Senate. However, he's not going to do that. He's going to do the executive agreement. That's substantially less assent that he requires. So the question I have is, if the deal is as good as they say it is, why won't they submit it to a Senate that, frankly, would support a deal that actually was binding and actually did do what they said it would?
John, it's Rick Unger. Here's the question that I have. I've been trying to do some research on understanding the difference between an executive agreement and a treaty. Very hard to figure out. The one thing I have figured out is that in the modern age, 94.6% of all of our agreements with foreign nations have been executive agreements. Now, I actually agree with you. I think this should go to the Senate and be treated like a treaty because I think they should have advice and consent. But can you tell us what determines when it's an executive
Rick, I have
agreement?
one question to you. What percentage of negotiations with a foreign power that involve nuclear weapons have been treaties versus executive agreements?
That's a great question. The only one that comes to mind is
nuclear weapons
SALT.
are really a big deal.
Yeah, but
they can blow up the world.
I'm not
That's
disagreeing.
why they're treaties always.
John, I'm not disagreeing with you. I actually agree with you on this. I'm just wondering if you can tell us the difference between an executive agreement and a treaty, because I can't figure it out.
If it's nuclear weapons, it should be a treaty.
Okay.
John, Heather Hansen here. I have a question for you. Today, Rand Paul was at South by Southwest, and he was asked about this, and he said that one of the reasons that he signed the agreement was to give the president a stronger stance in negotiations, to say, well, I've got to deal with Congress on this as well, and they may not stand behind me. Do you think that any type of that thought went into signing that letter, or do you think it was more just an utter frustration with the administration running around the Congress?
I think we know what he thinks.
I think thought did go into that, but it was an afterthought.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that the letter would have been better received and better thought out had it been addressed to the New York Times, the people of America, the president himself, rather than to Iran?
Oh, clearly it was a tactical mistake to address it to the Iranians. Again, anytime you deal with the Iranians, you're probably going to get burned. Ask Jimmy Carter, ask Ronald Reagan, ask every other previous president.
So, John, this segment's absolutely no fun at all. You and I agree on almost everything, and that doesn't happen very often. But let's see if we can keep it going, all this peace and love. So they've done this, right? They send the letter. Do you think the letter will actually get in the way of concluding an agreement, for better or for worse, or do you think it's a no harm, no foul?
Look, the real problem here is there's no one who believes this agreement actually means anything. The Iranians are not going to sign anything that actually takes away their ability to have a nuclear weapon, and the United States is going to not force any kind of an agreement which will force the Iranians away from the negotiating table. So you're going to have this pretend kabuki theater in which everybody will agree to an agreement that really no one agrees will be a real agreement. The real news here is not what's happening at the diplomatic table, it's the price of oil, which just hit a low low of $42, $43 a barrel. That's what's going to hurt the Iranians. And that's what may bring the Iranians, after a few more weeks or months of such low oil prices with their economy cratering, that may bring them to the table with some real substantive agreements. I think that the Saudis, by agreeing to the price of oil continuing to stay low, are putting the real pressure on Iran, not John Kerry.
John, I guess even in Tehran, it's the economy, stupid, and perhaps you're right. Oil may be ultimately the decider here, and not any sort of treaties or
well, we did see riots in the streets in 2009. Those could happen again, and the regime certainly doesn't want that.
John, we appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much. And coming up next, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton changes her tune on whether or not every email was reviewed by her staff. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV.